Most of the time, the conversations that we have about breastfeeding versus bottle feeding center around nutrition and the nutrient content of each way of feeding. And that's a really important conversation to have. Don't get me wrong, I'm not taking away from that. We need to have that conversation. But as is often the case, when we move away from God's design, there's a trickle down impact that flows into areas that we may not have considered on the front end. So today, I want to talk with you about the consequences that are outside of nutrition alone that result from bottle feeding and from using a pacifier, and how those things can impact your baby in ways you might not have thought of. And yes, this does include pumping and bottle feeding breast milk. Let's get into it. Are you a Christian woman yearning for a beautiful, joyful pregnancy and birth with a focus on God, not medical tests? Are you worried the birth you want isn't possible and you're tired of being treated like an accident waiting to happen? Hey Mama, I'm Lori, host of Your Birth God's Way. I'm a certified nurse-midwife now, but I wasn't always. After working for nearly 20 years in the broken maternity system, I too was in your shoes wondering how I could have the birth I wanted and that I felt God meant for me to have. I found a secret that has actually been known since the beginning of time. God's way is the best way. Spoiler alert, God made us and our babies, and He knows us best. He designed us perfectly for pregnancy, birth, and nourishing our babies after birth, if we work with His design and not against it. In this podcast, you'll learn how to be healthy and have joy during this time of life that will be over before you know it. So if you're ready to reclaim your birth and your babies for His glory, go turn on a few episodes of Bluey for that little one on your hip so you can put the focus back on you for a few minutes with me. It is review time. Again, one of my favorite times. I tell you guys this all the time. It encourages me so much when I see a new review pop up, and this review is no different. This review popped up back in September. The title says, "So thankful for this podcast." I'm so thankful for Lori and this podcast. When I found out I was pregnant with our 5th child, and that child actually was twins, I started listening to as many podcasts as I could. I found Lori and was so grateful for her encouragement in trusting God and our bodies. Previous, or I think she meant to say prior to this pregnancy, I had had 3 home births and 1 hospital birth, and of course with twins you're, quote, high risk and require an OB. But I knew God gave me twins for a reason and that He made my body able to deliver them. Lori's podcasts were always so encouraging to me. I looked forward to the next one every week. I went on to have a beautiful home birth and am forever grateful to God to be able to have that experience with my twins. Thank you, Lori, for always pointing us to Jesus and His ways. You are truly a gift. That was so sweet of you. I believe it's CJ. Thank you so much for those sweet, sweet words, and how cool that you had a home birth with twins. I love that. It can be done. It is not some far-fetched thing, but our world tells us that everything is one big accident waiting to happen, and some types of twins can have little things that make it more, quote, risky, but not all. It's not an automatic sentence. And so I love this review, and I love that you were encouraged to do what you knew God meant for you to do and made you to do. And I just love it. I love everything about this, and you've encouraged me so much. So thank you so much for that. For those of you who are listening who have not taken a minute to leave me a review, it really does make a difference. It's one of the best things you can do to help me reach other moms like you. It doesn't cost you a thing. Just go over to Apple Podcasts, leave me a quick 5-star written review. Helps me so much, and like, as you can tell, it encourages me. It makes me smile. It makes me happy. Not because there's anything special that I'm doing. All I'm doing is trying to help you get pointed back towards God, because God made this process. God made you for this process. And I just want to remind you of that. You already know it. It's just that the world has convinced you otherwise. And I just want to remind you that you're made for this in whatever way that I can. So thank you again, CJ. And let's get into our topic for today. It's no secret that breast milk is best when it comes to nourishing your baby. God made our milk perfect for our babies, and it grows with them over time nutritionally and with calorie content and all these different things that God built into this always ready system. No matter where you are, what time of day or night, it's always there, always ready, always perfect. The problems we have with breastfeeding are not because of God, but because of our culture and the lies and the pressures that our world has put on us. God's perfection has gotten twisted all the way back to the beginning, okay? We always know that His way is best, and yet the world has a way of convincing us that it's not, because it twists the truth. But today, I really actually don't want to talk about the nutrition part. We've kind of settled that. I mean, there's some people that still want to argue about it, but at the end of the day, it is not really disputable that breast milk content nutritionally is the best. Sorry, I got a little caught up there. It is the best. But there's other things that many times we are not considering that can arise when we go away from breastfeeding the way that God designed us to do. So today I want to talk about those downstream consequences that come with choosing to feed your baby with a bottle, whether it be formula or express breast milk. Okay, and that's going to be a little tough because I know some moms do choose to pump and then feed with a bottle their breast milk. And that is better than formula, yes, but you're still losing a few things. And so we're going to talk about that today. Our world tells us that fed is best. It basically insinuates that bottle feeding and breastfeeding are interchangeable. But let me remind you that the world is the kingdom of the enemy, and he is the father of lies. The world has taught us to trust in medicine and a medical system before God, and it's only been to our detriment. Think about how much money can be extracted from us over a lifetime when health conditions are installed in our babies from birth, when they convince us that it doesn't matter how or what we feed our babies. Think about over a lifetime, the problems that can develop from that one decision, and some that you haven't maybe considered that we're going to talk about. As we go through these next few things, I want you to consider these long-term health impacts. If any one of these things, even if one of them comes to fruition in our babies, how much money do various aspects of the medical system stand to make from these situations? And also, how much could some of these situations pull us away and pull our children, when they become adults, away from being able to fully serve God? There's about 5 things that I want you to consider. And there's more than this. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are 5 things that I think you probably have not considered that could be a result of bottle feeding your baby. Okay. The first thing I want you to think about is when you breastfeed your baby, meaning you put your baby latched onto your body, not pumping and bottle feeding, but the latch process. Think about the exchange that happens of bacterial information from mom to baby, and possibly other information as well, virus information, things like that. And what do I mean by that? Well, when a baby is latched on, the microbes from the baby's mouth that are in the baby's saliva exchange from the baby to the mom. It's thought that maybe later on in the feed, there's some retrograde flow that's happening to where the mom's body then responds to what's present in the baby's saliva, which then creates an appropriate immune response, making new immune cells that will then transfer to the baby in the next feeding. This is one of the beauties of the immune system setup for a brand new baby who doesn't have a fully functioning immune system just yet. It's growing, it's developing. And one of the beautiful ways it does that is through mom's milk. And the way mom's milk adjusts to what the baby needs is through this exchange that can only happen when the baby is actually latched on. If you pump milk and then bottle feed that milk, that exchange is not happening. It's still very nourishing, but that little element of the immune response is being left out. Again, pumping and bottle feeding is better than formula feeding, but even that loses this really, really neat feature of God's perfect mechanism for our babies. And I want to take a second here to say, as we go through these, I don't want you to become discouraged. I don't want you to think, well, I'm just going to lose out on all that. There's no way I can do this. Okay, stay tuned to the end. We're going to talk about ways that you can do this. I'm not leaving you with no hope. Okay, I just want to help you have even more reason to lean on God's design. And so that's what the whole purpose of this is to help you realize God's design really does have a purpose beyond just nutrition. Okay, so first thing is just that exchange of the bacterial information or the virus information to where you're having an immune boost from mom to baby. Okay, really cool thing that you can't get any other way. Have you been looking for a course online to help you prepare for your natural birth, but you're sick of having to weed through the content to take out all that new agey stuff or the flat out ungodly advice? Well, I've got some great news for you. There is now a course that will teach you everything you need to know to be fully prepared for birth, postpartum, and breastfeeding from a Christian perspective on demand, taught by a midwife with over 20 years of experience in the maternity world. And that midwife is me. After many years of being indoctrinated into that godless, medicalized maternity world, I woke up to the truth and realized that most of the maternity system in our country is based on lies. I became a doula and then a midwife, and now I help moms like you have a God-led, God-filled birth from an informed position so that you do not have to be led by fear, but rather by faith in God and knowledge of the truth. Inside this course, you will be engulfed in Scripture while learning about God's ways of nutrition, prenatal care, birth, postpartum care, breastfeeding, what dad needs to know, and so much more. In addition to the course content itself, which is available in both video and audio formats, you'll get workbooks for each module so you can take notes on what you want to remember, Christian relaxation audio tracks to use during pregnancy and labor, printable affirmation cards, and the best part, you'll get access to a live question and answer session with me each month to ask your questions. To sign up or learn more, head over to go.yourbirthgodsway.com/course. That's go.yourbirthgodsway.com/course. Now, this is a serious course, and it's only for serious mamas who truly want to have their birth God's way. So if that's you, head over to go.yourbirthgodsway.com/course today, and I'll see you in the course. Second thing, palate formation. What's the palate? Well, it's the roof of your mouth, that hard thing up in the top, and then it's also soft in the back. Over the course of infancy on into childhood, that palate is forming and growing, okay? And if you take your finger and you reach up there, you can tell there's some give to it. It's hard, but there's still some give to it. Normal develop of the palate and the gums, the jaws, the musculature, the bone structure, that all develops over time, and breastfeeding actually contributes directly to its proper formation. The movements of the mouth and the tongue contribute to how these things develop. When you think of a baby nursing, don't think how you suck on a straw. That suck motion that we do on a straw is not the same as the way that a baby latches onto a breast and nurses to draw the milk out. It is a really cool, almost a wave-like motion that happens. And over time, that pressure of the tongue with the breast up onto the roof of the mouth helps that palate to widen properly and to not be narrow, okay? Also, there's jaw, bone, muscles, all kinds of things playing in. But right now, I just want to focus on this palate, okay? As a contrast, think about a bottle. Okay, bottles, even if they are supposedly breastfeeding friendly, they are harder and they are a little bit pointier than a breast will be when it is properly in the baby's mouth for breastfeeding. So the nipple of that bottle is pressing on the roof of the mouth in a way that is not natural. It's changing the way that the baby sucks, and that unnatural pressure that's on the roof of the mouth presses it upward over time, and over time, that palate actually gets higher and more narrow than it would naturally have become in a breastfeeding baby. That normal sucking is altered so the tongue doesn't press on the palate normally, and then that combined with the pointy nature of a plastic or rubber nipple, it is going to impact the way that that palate forms, okay? Why does that matter? Well, let's move on to the next one, and I think you'll see. Palate malformation contributes to the misalignment of teeth, okay? Not to mention that when you are feeding with a bottle, most people who are feeding with a bottle are feeding with formula. The combined impact of lack of nutrition plus a bottle pushing on the roof of the mouth, and when I say lack of nutrition, I mean lack of proper nutrition that comes from breast milk. These two elements together contribute to a narrow palate. When you have a narrow palate, a high palate, it can cause your jawline not to expand like it's meant to do. So then that leads to there not being enough room for all of the permanent teeth to come in when that time comes. There's a great book about this, about the nutritional aspect, and I believe he touches on breastfeeding some in that book as well. It's called Traditional Foods Are Your Best Medicine by Ronald Schmid. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's a really, really interesting look at how palate formation really does impact the way our teeth come in. And if you just look around, there are crooked teeth and crowded teeth everywhere you look, and people are getting braces earlier and earlier. And all of these things can be solved by proper nutrition and breastfeeding in large part. Now, nutrition is deep, okay? And one of the things you'll learn in this book is about how different tribes of people in different areas of the world who were still eating their original ancestral diets, far from far from dental care, not going to the dentist and getting their teeth all pretty and white. These people had perfect teeth, because they were eating their natural ancestral diets in the places where their tribes originated. What was even more interesting is just one generation removed from that, one generation removed into eating more and more processed foods, and that very first generation outside of it already started to show changes in the way that their teeth and their jaws were developing. They were starting to have crooked, crowded teeth. One generation removed. Okay, this isn't a long-term genetic change. It was just the nutrition, the change in the nutrition. It is that serious. Okay, so I would love for you to get that book. It's a really, really good book. You might not be able to find it new. I actually think I bought it off of a used book website, but I'll put a link down below if I can find it on Amazon for you. Another aspect when you have these misaligned teeth is that your bites don't connect, and that leads to needing orthodontics, which try to fix something without even addressing the underlying problem. Okay, it's an expensive problem. Braces are not cheap, and it's also a long-term problem, because if you put the braces on, they do their job. Maybe sometimes you have to have teeth pulled and things, which should never have to happen to get all your teeth to fix. But then you take the braces off and teeth start to move again because you haven't solved the problem. And sometimes further on in life, you can't solve it anymore because your bones have already formed and it's really hard to get them to grow at that point, which is why we have to spend a lot of time and thought and effort in making sure that we're feeding our babies properly so that they're getting a good start, so they're getting nice wide palates with good growth in their jawline, so that they have plenty of room for those teeth, so that they fit in properly. This is not about cosmetics and just being pretty. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But I will say that a lot of the narrow palates that you see, a lot of the narrow jawlines that you see, a lot of the overbites and underbites that you see, they are not genetic. They are related to the way that that person has been fed and is now feeding themselves once they're adults. These are things that we can definitely alter and change, and the place to change them is all the way back at newborn stage. Now, granted, if you've got a kid that's 10 or 15 years old, it's a little late for that. You can start to work on the nutrition now. But if you've got babies, or you have friends who are having babies, or you've got daughters who are having babies, it's not too late for them. I want you to learn this information and share it with them. All right, so we've got the first one was about the exchange of information for the immune response. Second was the palate malformation, which then led to the third, which was the tooth formation. The fourth thing I want you to consider, that I bet you've not thought of, is how bottle feeding can change the habits that we develop with eating and feeding our emotions. Now, most of the people who listen to my podcast are women. And most of the people who listen to my podcast have probably eaten chocolate before or binged on a bag of potato chips or something like that when they were having a bad day. Now, am I saying that's because you were bottle fed? No, but hear me out, okay? Breastfeeding lends itself to not feeding unnecessarily, because if your baby has eaten and your baby is full, they're not going to keep doing the work they need to do to eat at your breast. It's a little bit harder work. Also, you're not going to be as quick to offer it when you know that your baby just ate, or you know that there's not a need at that time, because it's less convenient when it comes to getting everything out. You know what I mean? Getting all the equipment out for your baby. Not that it's a lot of work to breastfeed, but it's less convenient if you're out or if you're around people than just sticking a bottle in the baby's mouth, right? So if you're out and you're in the middle of something and your baby gets upset, if you're a breastfeeding mom, your first move is usually not to feed the baby. But see, bottle feeding makes it easier to just feed the baby, because if you have a crying, fussy baby, very often, if you're bottle feeding, one of the first things you're going to do is give that baby a bottle, especially once that baby can hold its own bottle, to try to make the crying stop. So what does this mean? That baby starts to make the connection that if I'm sad, if I'm upset, if I am tired, if I am bored, if I didn't get my way, any of these things, the solution to that thing is to eat. They start to make that connection because they're very smart and their brains are very impressionable. And so they're very early on learning that if anything goes wrong, the thing that will make it better is eating. Eating is great. Eating keeps us alive, but eating's function is to keep us alive, to give us our nutrition and our calories to carry on the functions of life. Eating is not there for soothing our emotions. And we really need to work hard to not teach our babies that eating is the way you solve things. Now, I hear some of you saying right now, well, I breastfeed my baby when it's upset because that's comfort. Yes, you're right. But don't miss this. The comfort that your baby is getting in those moments is usually you, not the food. You know this when you've seen your upset baby suck a few times and then go to sleep in your arms, because they're getting your love and your contact and your comfort. It's not about the food at that point. But a formula fed, bottle fed baby, very often it's just getting a bottle given to them. They're not getting that love and that contact. It's just the food that is calming them down. So you see this connection that could be made in a baby's brain from the earliest stages, that when you're upset, when you're sad, when you're mad, when you're tired, when you're bored, any of these things, the way you fix it is to eat. And that can lead to a lifetime of eating disorders or metabolic dysfunction or weight problems, you name it, the list goes on. Okay, so that's the fourth thing that can result from not breastfeeding your baby. Last one, toxic exposure. I want to read to you a list of ingredients from a formula that I found on a very frequently visited store's website. I'm not going to name it because I don't know what kind of laws involved in all that, but a store you've been to before, and one of the formulas that they have on their shelf. I printed out the ingredients. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I've got it here. I'm going to read it to you. Ingredients, and I'm going to do the best I can because some of these I can't pronounce, which is your first clue. Partially hydrolyzed reduced minerals whey protein concentrate, lactose, corn maltodextrin, palm olein, soybean oil, coconut oil, high oleic safflower oil or high oleic sunflower oil, 2-O-fucosilactose, Mortierella alpina oil, Cryptocodonium coney oil, taurine, L-carnitine, nucleotides, and then it has a list of different nucleotides that I'm not going to try to pronounce, Bifidobacterium lactis, trypsin, soy lecithin, so we get 2 soy ingredients, ascorbyl palmitate, and mixed tocopherols, and then a list of vitamins, which are all synthetic, and a list of minerals that are all synthetic. None of these things are organic. None of these things can guarantee that they haven't been doused with who knows what, but every one of them has been made in a lab. When we start our babies on these types of ingredients from birth or from the first few months of life. Maybe you breastfeed for a few months and then you switch over to formula. They are being built with these building blocks, with these artificial building blocks that do not come directly from the food that God gave us for our babies, which is breast milk. Formula use really started to become more mainstream in the 1950s. And I want you to think, has our health as a society gotten better or gotten worse since that time? Have our children become healthier or less healthy during that time? From the beginning, God gave mothers the perfect food for their babies for free, built in, on demand, that is non-toxic. Now, granted, that's related to what you eat, which takes us back to all the nutrition episodes we've done. Yes, you need to put non-toxic things into your body, but at the very least, you are a filter for the food before it gets to your baby. Your body is filtering out the toxins and giving your baby the purest form that it can. Okay, this toxic exposure of these artificial foods that we are feeding our babies over time are causing them to have sickness established in their systems long before they ever get to make their own choices. Our choices matter. Okay, our choices matter. Now, most of these could apply for pumping and bottle feeding. This last one was just for formula, but I want you to know that every step that we take away from God's plan causes impact. There is trickle down impact and sometimes very noticeable impact that can cause really big problems. But the more we stick with God's design, the better off we are and the better off our babies are. He knows what we need, and He knew what we needed when He designed us all the way back in the beginning and when He made each individual one of us at our conception. This world has convinced us that it is hard or maybe even impossible to feed our babies the way that God designed for us to do. We've got multiple layers of doubt that have been sewed into our consciences to remind us that we can't do it. We aren't good enough. We're not going to be able to figure it out. It's too hard. But we can undo that programming with the right help. And that is why I made an entire lesson of my course about getting started in breastfeeding and then establishing it in a way that it will continue for as long as you want it to. I've helped countless women breastfeed over the last 20 plus years. And on top of that, I put my money where my mouth was, right? I nursed all three of my babies well past a year. AJ nursed for 26 months, which meant I actually tandem nursed him and Ruby, my middle child, for several months. Then Ruby continued nursing till she was 16 months old. And when Abby was on her way, then I think something changed in my milk. Ruby didn't really want it anymore. So she switched off onto raw milk right when we started getting raw milk. And then Abby came along and she was the winner. She nursed for 4 years. And I think she would probably still be nursing if I would have let her. On her 4th birthday, we decided that relationship needed to be over, which is ironic because I'm actually recording this episode on October 14th, which is the anniversary of the day before her 4th birthday, which is the 15th. Tomorrow is her 7th birthday. So today is the anniversary of the last time that I nursed my baby. I nursed her for 4 years. Pretty cool. I want you to have that kind of track record. I want you to be able to tell these stories when you're helping people nurse in the future, when you're helping encourage some young mom who thinks she can't do it, and you're the one that's in her ear helping her to know she can. I want you to have that track record, and I can help you do that when you join the online Christian childbirth education course that I offer. But that's just part of it. You're also going to be thoroughly and completely prepared to have the birth that God designed for you to have. You're going to have all the information and encouragement that you need to walk confidently through this time, which is one of the most beautiful, purpose-filled times of your life. This is what God made you for. If you didn't hear last week, I've got a special running through October 31st. If you'll use code Helene, Helene, in the summary box at checkout, you can take 10% off the entire course. And remember, you also get access to me during the monthly live question and answer session. So while the course really does cover everything under the sun that you can imagine, if you have something you need more clarification on, you have that opportunity at no extra cost. It's funny though, lately people have been coming to the question and answer sessions just to hang out because they don't really have questions, which I think is a testament to how thoroughly the topics are covered. So I'd love to have you come join us so that these things that we talked about today don't have to be a part of your story. I want for you to have the story that God designed for you to have. I want your baby to be healthy and strong. So go ahead and join the course. You're going to get so much information, so much encouragement to where you won't have these problems. And I'll see you right back here next week. Real quick, if today's episode blessed you in any way, would you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a quick 5-star written review? It'll take you less than a minute, but it's the best thank you can give me. And it will help my show to reach more mamas just like you, so we can all find God's best for our families. I'll see you right back here in a few days.